Bienvenidos. Welcome to the 47th annual convening of one of the most enriching experiences in our community, the celebration of diversity and traditions known as Tucson Meet Yourself. I am Supervisor Betty Villegas, and on behalf of the Pima County Board of Supervisors and all the residents of our beloved community, I am happy you can join us. Pima County is a mix of ancestral cultures with lifetime and longtime residents and our new arrivals, all sharing the air, the land, and the history of the beautiful Sonoran Desert. Lucky for us, we also share the foods, dances, music, manual arts, and rituals of dozens of different cultural communities and folk groups, all of which call Pima County home. Every year, Tucson Meet Yourself, sometimes referred to as TMY, is our community's shared big tent where we discover, respect, and celebrate each other. Congratulations and thank you, Tucson Meet Yourself organizers, for adapting this year's 2020 festival to the new public health precaution guidelines. This year, TMY has reframed the event to include a socially distanced virtual experience that offers each of us an opportunity to be connected while remaining safe. There is so much beauty, strength, and resilience in every one of our cultural traditions, and I encourage you to join us in support and celebration of them all. Please enjoy all the offerings, and remember, we will get through all the challenges because we are Pima County strong.
Welcome to this program, part of the 2020 edition of Tucson Meet Yourself Reframe. I want to take this moment to thank our sponsors. Without their generosity, none of these wonderful offerings would have been possible. First, our major sponsors: Pima County, the City of Tucson, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Arizona Commission on the Arts, the Arts Foundation for Tucson and Southern Arizona, and the University of Arizona College of Social and Behavioral Sciences, and the Southwest Center. In addition, I want to thank our presenting sponsors, businesses that stuck with us even in these difficult times. Thank you to Cox, Tucson Electric Power, Visit Tucson, Desert Diamond Casino, and Chicanos por la Causa. Enjoy the program.
Hello, and welcome to Tucson Meet Yourself. My name is Kate Alexander, Performance Curator for the festival, and I'm so glad you've joined us for Traditions Thursdays, a series of online conversations and demonstrations celebrating and exploring the performing arts. Traditions Thursdays are presented by Cox, who we thank for their generous support. Many thanks as well to Adam Cooper-Turan, our digital producer, and our interpreters. In this 47th year of Tucson Meet Yourself, and on behalf of myself and the entire team behind this reframed virtual festival, thank you for being part of this community and for your ongoing support. Tucson Meet Yourself has always been free and open to the public, and we like to keep it that way. This festival is for you, and we ask your help to support the continuation of this Tucson tradition. If you can, please consider making a donation at tucsonmeetyourself.org/donate. Today, I'm so pleased to welcome you to More Than Jigs, Music and Dance in Celtic Traditions. My guests today are Claire Zucker, Dave FIRESTINE, Christine SOLINSKY, and ABBIE SORG. With their wide-ranging skills as multi-instrumentalists, contradance callers, Irish dancers, and tradition bearers, will be taking a trip through the transformation of Irish traditional music and dance into the distinctively American contradance tradition. And of course, it wouldn't be TMY without some performance. So a very, very warm welcome to the four of you. Thank you so much for being part of this brand new thing we're doing in the festival. To start, can we just go around and have you all briefly introduce yourselves? Claire, would you like to begin?
Sure. I'm really, really pleased to be asked to be part of this. Dave and I have been in bands together for many years, and he'll go next, I imagine. But we've been at Tucson Meet Yourself so many years, and it's been a really important part of our connection with the community and our connection with all the many different traditions of music and dance that fill our community. So we really appreciate being here. I've been doing Irish music and contra dance actually for many years. Since I was about in my late 20s, I started doing this stuff. I play Bowron, I play concertina, I'm a singer, Irish traditional singer, and I've moved over the years into contra dance calling and also playing for contra dances and playing old time music. So just a range of traditional music in that genre set that all feeds into contra dance, both in my life and as we're going to talk about today in the musical traditions too. Do you want to go?
Okay, I'm Dave, and I've been playing music since I was in grammar school. I did drums, was into Benny Goodman and Beethoven, and then I lived near San Francisco, and so I was at the Fillmore pretty much every week. But when I first heard traditional music, I was I don't know, I loved it. I loved it, and I started playing mandolin then. I'd played guitar before because I love to play melodies, and I found a dance community in Minneapolis when I lived there, and I danced both to contra dance and also to Irish ceilidhs. So for me, music and dance have been together for a long time, and I enjoy it. I love the tunes, I love the people, I love the experience. So that's me.
Hey, I should mention my kids were both Irish dancers, and that's why we know Christine. And so big kudos to the Irish community here in Tucson. So
I guess I can go next with that introduction. I am originally from Tucson. I've kind of grown up going to Tucson Meet Yourself, mostly as a performer with the various Irish dancing schools over the years. I was a competitive and professional Irish dancer for 15 years, 15 to 18. I am retired now, but I was part of a couple of the dance schools over the years in Tucson, and then continued when I went abroad for college and danced in Ireland for several years as well. And now I live in Boston, which is, kind of constantly surrounded by bits and pieces of Irish culture. So it's been a nice place to settle down.
And I'm Abbie SORG, and I am a more recent participant in the contra dance scene here in Tucson. I grew up listening to music, loving music, and I've loved attending as a participant and a viewer of Tucson Meet Yourself for several years now. And I'm excited to be taking part in this conversation as a recent dancer in contra dance and a caller of contra dance. I'm just in my beginning years of calling, and I'm looking forward to many more to come.
Great, thank you all so much. We have a range of experiences, but all of us, such deep connections to the music and to the dance as well, which, as many of you have already said, are so deeply and integrally connected. And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. So to begin, I guess, maybe with sort of what we could call the foundations of our topic today, and that's Irish fiddle music and its connections to dance. So maybe to begin, Claire and Christine, perhaps sort of a introduction to that music and that dance and how they are connected to each other in their more traditional contexts in Ireland.
Christine, why don't you start, and then Dave and I can chip in.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a historical context, there obviously is a really strong tradition around fiddle music, and I think a lot of it goes back to kind of the older traditions in, I think it was like the mid 1800s, and a little bit earlier, and they had the dancing masters who would kind of go from town to town teaching the children mostly, but the whole town would come out to learn to dance, and they often brought a musician along with them, and I think it was often a fiddle player, because, you know, it's easy to bring a fiddle with you on the road. And so that kind of tradition built up, and out of that you had like the ceilidh dances at the crossroads, and kind of where the whole town could come together to celebrate the culture. Obviously with the penal laws and some of the English attempts to dampen down Irish culture, there was some challenges, I think, that came up. But at least from my understanding, that's kind of where it all started, in terms of the fiddle music and dance coming together.
There's some great old films of ceilidh dances in Kilfenora and the Kilfenora Ceilidh Band. Remember those videos? We've seen those. And you see a room full of dancers doing set dances and doing ceilidh dances, and a big band with now what we would consider like all-star Irish musicians that are in these bands from the like 70s. Right? You want to talk about that at all? Or throwing you that.
Yeah, the ceilidh bands, you know, there were a number of, and they still exist, and they're big bands. They'd have a drummer and, you know, multiple fiddles and accordions and other instruments, and playing in like the church hall, playing music for people to, and there's different kinds of dances, and including couples dances, waltzes and polkas, and as well as set dances and ceilidh dances, which someone else will explain.
Well, we have some video of both the ceilidh. I think we're going to play one of a ceilidh dance and also of solo dancing. So why don't we play that, and then we can talk a little bit about solo dancing, and each solo dance was to a different kind of music, and we can kind of move into that. Brings it back, doesn't it, Christine?
Oh yeah, in a big way.
Why don't you tell them about that, about the solo dancing?
Yeah, so the second clip you saw is I guess example of more modern forms of Irish step dancing, and that's a dance typically done at a competition or at a show. And you could see everyone, it's a little bit more individualistic. Everyone had their own specific steps that they did. You can see the kind of the fancier, what we would call solo dresses, which you have to get to a certain level of competition to be able to get one that was uniquely your own. Up until that time, like you had a dress that was the same as everyone else, the same as everyone in your particular dancing school, kind of like the uniform. So all the girls dancing there had reached a certain level through by competing for a number of years. Kind of like you have to work your way up the ranks. But they were doing a reel, and a treble reel is a really lovely example of a lot of the rhythms that can go into. You could tell they were wearing hard shoes, so they're similar to tap shoes in that it's a leather shoe, but they have fiberglass tips and heels, which allows the rhythms to come out. Whereas in the Kaylee dance, the first clip you saw, they were in soft shoes that didn't make any noise. So both are done in competition and in solo dancing with both types of shoes and various types of music. And but I can let Claire maybe give more of the background on the different music types. She'll be much better at that than me.
Well, we can talk about that together, but I have to say that so we had my daughters, Catherine and Danielle, both did Irish dances. Christine did in her family, and it wasn't uncommon for kids to get up when we were playing music and do a dance about. Is that the right word? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we used to call them, where we all just did a step down the line.
All did a step. So they would say, play the reel, play the slip jig, play the jig. You know, it's like, but mostly play the reel. It would always crack us up because, of course, there's not just one.
Yeah.
How did you talk about?
We didn't really care. Like, we just wanted to dance, and so we knew what we wanted, and you knew what we wanted, and it worked out.
They'd be dancing along, and you'd see their little hands go like this.
Pick
like,
it up.
Pick it up.
Or slow it down.
Or slow it down, because they're very specific, particularly for the hard shoe dances. Yeah. There's specific meters, there are specific tempos that they have to do their steps. And if it's too fast, they can't fit them in. And if it's too slow, they can't keep in the air long enough. So anyway, why don't you talk about the meters?
So in the first clip, they were doing a dance to a jig, which was in 6/8, and then it went to a reel in the solo dancing. There's also dancing to slip jigs, which are 9/8, and those are wonderful tunes. But there's also polkas and hornpipes, and between reels and hornpipes, there's a whole expanse of things in 4/4 with a different amount of swing. And they can be barn dances, and sometimes they're called Germans, but they're in 4/4, and there's dances to all of them. In competition, there's also dances that can be jigs or reels, and they can be crooked. Meaning there's not 32 bars each time through. They can have extra bars, and the dances goes to a specific tune at a specific time. And so when you're playing for the competition, you get the stink eye if you're too slow or too fast or anything else. And
oh yeah,
there was one time that we were at the dance studio, and there was a young woman who was dancing, and we weren't playing. There was a CD playing, and you could see her hand moving like, pick it up. Going, it's
the CD.
It's the CD. It's not us. But that's something that we worked hard on when we were playing for the dances, for when they needed specific things. You know, we had our metronomes out and we practiced doing that, because the music, you know, and the dances, I'm sure they develop together, and they really are, they need to be together to get the most out of it. And
Yeah.
so that's,
So we actually prepared a clip going from a jig to a slip jig to a couple reels. And so I think if you could play that now, I'll also mention that the second reel, we can't help ourselves. We have to we just feel the need to play more vigorously, and it starts to sound more contradance like. So you can almost hear in this one set the transition from sort of more staid and straight ahead playing to the more adventurous. And later on in this thing, we'll have the more adventurous. So if you want to play that.
1, 2, 3, 4.
part of my background is studying Cape Breton style fiddle and step dancing, as well as Cape Breton style square dancing. And so I could spend all day just talking about how are dancers thinking about interactions with the music? Like when you hear live versus recorded music, what is that interaction like? How are you thinking about your movement, your footwork, your movement of your body through space? And I think maybe that's something we can return to at the sort of in the last section when we turn to contradance and think about, once again, how are movement and dance really connected to each other. But for now, I think thinking about how this sort of unified music and dance entity sort of migrated to the United States and started to morph into, in its new context, new musicality, new movement, new need, really. What was the dance and music doing here?
Well, why don't I start a little bit on that? So Irish music was one strand of music that came to the United States, and it came into the southern, into the Appalachians, but it also came in largely through New England area and into modern day. It's still continuing to migrate both directions across the ocean. But Scottish music, English music, other kinds of music came across, and the dance came with it. So, for example, in the Appalachian Mountains, Scottish music was very strong, and there were a lot of square sets that came over from the Scottish country dancing, and the footwork of that dancing found a modern form in more modern form in clogging, and that's an Appalachian style of dancing. The Irish step dancing also came into and added to that clogging tradition. So did English clog dancing. So all of these dances from sort of the Celtic traditions of Scotland, Ireland, England, France and Spain, even that whole area came across. And so you see the clog dancing of the Appalachian Mountains done to fiddle tunes. You see sort of more English country dancing that was done in New England. And all of this happened in the 1800s in the United States. There were big migrations in the 1800s, particularly from Ireland, related to the famine, but Scotland before that, with the clearances and everything else, it just caused a lot of migration of those people across, and the dance came with them. So when you look at the New England Grange halls, one of the things those were used for were English country dancing and different kinds of dancing that eventually evolved into contra dancing, which is a totally American origin tradition built on those other music and dance traditions. And you first see contra dancing in the 1800s, and then it had a resurgence in the 1920s, and then again a resurgence in the 1950s. So as the dance changed, as it came across, the music also changed. And in the Appalachian Mountains, in the Southern Appalachian Mountains, there was a big African influence from the slaves that were in that area, and they added a lot to the musical traditions there too. There were also native peoples that added to those traditions. So it really became a real mix, particularly in the Appalachian area, and old time fiddle music evolved out of that. And associated with that were square dancing, and was not the square dancing you think of today, that's been more formalized, but the old style square dancing and clogging of the Appalachian Mountains. And so David and I have played a lot of old time music, and I don't know if you want to say anything about the style of that music as compared to New England or other styles.
Well, it's hard to say there's a particular style. I mean, one of the things that happened when people emigrated to the Appalachian Mountains, you hear about these remote places, that people lived, and instead of having a big community where, there were a lot of people playing together, there were a lot of individuals that, lived way out in the woods and maybe played with their family, and tunes that they knew as Irish or Scottish they slowly evolved, and there are tunes today. There's one called Booth Shot Lincoln, which is is a, it was originally an Irish jig called the Market Town, but if you listen to Booth, it's the same melody. It's just done in 4/4, and it's typically done faster and a lot of syncopation in it. And often, because the musicians were playing just by themselves or with just a few people, if they added an extra beat here and there, that's what they did. and and so when somebody else had come along and they go, oh, that guy's hard to play with, he does these extra things in there. But it's just great how music evolves. And when you're clogging, you don't care if there's an extra beat, you just do an extra step in there. And so it's
And I've actually, so I'm a clogger also, and done that for years. And I've clogged in front of a lot of Irish dancers because my kids were dancing and we'd be playing music, and they would tell me that it was very much like the sean-nós dancing of Ireland. And so, and the way I held my body, not straight up and down, and the way I would dance across the what they said across the phrase. So I'm dancing to the tune, not to the strict phrase as the Irish dancer would do. So there's a lot of links between clogging and sean-nós Irish dancing. So we have that from the authorities. So anyway, so that's kind of the story of the music and the dance coming across.
Yeah, but I think it's important to say that in all the places where the music is played, it's developed its own slang, its own way of playing, and the dancing and the playing is different in different places depending on what the music is like and what the dancers are used to. And I mean, there are extreme cases. There was a group in Missouri that they loved to dance squares with taps, jingle taps, which are like extremely loud. The band had to be electric, but in order to get the momentum of the jingle taps, they would play incredibly fast. Like normally you'd be in 120 beats per minute. These would be 140. And they would just crank out these things, and there was no way anybody could hear a caller. So each square had its own caller. And it just sounds like from the outside it would be cacophony, but
Sounds really bad.
but that was a place where the dance and the music evolved. That was they have a great time, and they still do it. So,
and then when you look at contradance, I heard somebody once say in an interview, it's like as if square dance and swing dance met in a bar, because there's elements of swing in the way they dance, but there's elements of square dance moves in contradance. So I just love that. It doesn't have the formation of square dance, but it has, yeah.
So then where did Contra, as sort of a distinct thing that we can recognize, where did it emerge? How did it emerge?
Yeah, actually, I was just doing a little research today, and well, I didn't have time for a lot, but I did learn a new thing, which was that Ford Motors had something to do with that. He actually published a book in the 1926 on contradance, and he wanted to start a contradance in Michigan. And so he knew this person in New England who had been doing contradance, and they said they couldn't come out because they had an obligation to work at this particular inn. So he bought the inn and took the guy to Michigan to teach contradance. So it was already an established tradition in New England, but it was actually a tradition in the Midwest. There was contradance. It's very mixed with square dance too now. there's a lot of square dances that are done at contra dances and not so much vice versa, but they're incorporated somewhat. So I would say in the 1800s, the English country dance was coming of an age, and then contra dance sort of emerged in the early 1900s. And then as jazz came in and sort of the swingy jazz movement, there was a big decline in it because of the different musical tastes. And that's kind of a story for Irish music and song as well, or traditional music and song as well, because some of the instruments are not really made to play those swinging notes. But then in the 50s, there was a resurgence of contra dance, particularly in New England, which is sort of the mecca for contra dance, for a lot of people. But that said, the traditions of contra dance and the music and the dance are all over the United States now. I mean, they're in every state. There are dance weekends where people go for a whole weekend or a week to dance to this music and to play the music. And it's really, in my opinion, its own genre now, because it may be an Irish tune, but it's paired with something totally different and it's played very differently. So, and the dance is different. It's not as formalized.
Yeah, one of the things when we're playing music for a contra dance, we get together with the caller and say, what moves are in this dance? You know, because there's some things that we think of as punctuation. There are things that where everybody's going to be together doing something and it's kind of big. And so we'll find tunes or we'll adapt tunes to fit the dances so that when they're doing a particular move, the music is pushing them. It's encouraging to move. And that's one of the things that's fun about playing in a fun dance band is you can look at the dancers and say, oh, how can we goose them? What can we do?
And it's like their footballs are metronome, or not even a metronome. They're like our energy source. You look at the dancers and it's like, look at them go. So,
So to carry that idea forward for the dancers, I think, Abbie, turning to you now, how do you feel about your interaction with the musicians? What is it like from the floor?
Right, and as I was listening to Dave talking about matching the tune to the dance, I've been dancing for about 5 years now, so not very long, and I've been calling dances for about 2 years. No, a year and a half, and half of that year has been this wonderful time we're in right now where there's not a lot of in-person dancing, or none. But hearing him talking about that is so important to a dancer, is to feel that music happening from the band. And it's like a kind of a soundboard that the sound is coming out of the band and it's hitting the dancers, and the dancers will feel that sound, and the energy from the dancers gets sent back to the band, and you can feel that synergy between the dancers and the band in the hall. And some nights it's better, some nights it's not as good. There's not always that perfect connection, but when there's that connection, it's a fantastic feeling as a dancer to you can kind of tell when that 64 beat set is repeated over and over as you're dancing up and down the line, because contra dance happens in long lines of sets of dancers. And so you repeat the same set of moves over and over again, moving up and down the hall. And you can feel when the song's gonna come to a crescendo, and you can feel that energy coming from the band and that punch. It's a great feeling, and it's really a sense of community and of the band couldn't be doing this without the dancers, and the dancers certainly could not be doing this without the band. It's really everyone bringing something to the table and making a bigger thing than any individual could be creating on their own. So that's that was one of the things that really drew me to contra dancing when I first started, was that feeling of community and that feeling of it's a really egalitarian kind of dance, where the people that have been dancing for 50 years and the people that have never danced before, that just walked in off the street that day, everyone can dance together and does dance together and brings something good to that table. And
that is actually very much based on the Grange Hall tradition. I mean, the concept at, you know, in New England Grange Hall is that it was for a broad community, and that you should be able to walk off the street and dance. And that's a very different thing from modern square dancing, where there's an extensive lesson plan for people. So the square dances that are done at contra dances are also meant for people to be able to dance straight off the street. So the caller is actually teaching the dance, and that's a big part of calling.
yeah, and learning how to call also has been an interesting thing to see. As a dancer, it feels pretty easy. You just kind of, as Claire said, you walk in off the street and you're told, okay, here's what you do, here's how we're going to do this dance. And it feels pretty seamless most of the time as a dancer. And that's a lot of work is put in by the caller. I know Claire has a lot of experience with calling contra dances as well. And I'm learning every day. Every time I call, I figure out how to be more helpful to the dancers, because the caller is really kind of an intermediary, someone to help the dancers and the band communicate together and get that rhythm going, so that eventually the caller can back out. Once everyone's got the dance, the caller backs out and you don't really hear much from them. And then you get that really beautiful interplay between the dancers and the band, and you get that creation of music between all those people in the hall.
Slide, slide.
Dave, what do you draw out of that example?
Well, that's us playing, along with our bandmates Alice and Robert, and along with Mary Rudd calling. So
Yeah.
that's great.
Well, when you're playing for dancers, and we know a lot of people in Albuquerque, and so it was fun, you know, to see friends out there dancing. But when you play for a contra dance, they go on for, I don't know how long,
10 minutes.
10 minutes or so. And so when you're playing a tune, you don't just play it the same way each time. You can feature different people, or you can do just rhythm. You can do different things. You can explore the tune, but at the same time, fit it to what the dance needs. And
So you're sort of trying, what you're doing is you're feeling their mood, and you're feeling your own musical mood, and a lot of the arranging that you heard, you know, when things would get bigger or smaller, drum breaks, it's, for us, it's very much just the communication within the band. So we didn't have that plan. We just feel that way. And so, you know, sometimes, for example, Robert took a break at one point. We know when, you know, that we need to get out of his way when he's taking a break, or Alice takes something really big, or in that one, actually, I was singing as a melody for part of it. So it's how can you shape the tunes in the 10-minute dance to create an arc that is emotionally satisfying and really helps people, I mean, to the dancers, and really helps them feel more and be better dancers because the music is with them. So
yeah, it's a creative process. Playing in that context is, you know, it's like an improvisation. We know the basic melody, we know the basic structure of the tune, and we'll often play that. But then we get diverted by, you know,
whatever, they did this thing over there, so I guess I'll do something like this.
Or, you know, I'm a rhythm guy. I mean, I love rhythms, and so sometimes I'll inject a slightly different rhythm that I think might make the dancers move a little bit differently. And
so Abby, do you pick up on that when we're playing, like when you listen to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about the times that maybe are more interesting is once everyone's gotten the dance down, and you're in that last half of that 10-minute period where the colors dropped out, and maybe there'll be a run through of the tune where it's just the rhythm, or a run through of the tune where it's just the fiddle. And yeah, like Dave was saying, it changes the way you move as a dancer. Like, oh, if it's just the percussion playing, I'm going to be changing how I'm moving to the dance. I'm going to be doing the same moves, the same steps, but I'm going to hold my body in a different way. I'm going to be understanding the tune in a different way than if it was the whole band or just the melody, or, you know, whatever. That the changes in what's being played certainly changes the atmosphere on the dance floor for the dancers.
And what's the role of the caller in sort of, I don't know if this is a proper characterization, sort of shaping the dancer's feel of the dance? Does that make sense? Is there any role there? What is the caller up to in this relationship?
Yeah, so before each dance, before the band comes in playing the music, the caller will walk through the dance, the specific steps for that dance, for that 10-minute dance with the dancers, just kind of in the hall, and say, okay, next you're going to do this, and next you're going to do this. So everyone knows what they're getting into ahead of time. And it really helps everyone to say, okay, I know what I'm going to be doing, so that when the band comes in, it's a faster transition to that point where the dancers and the band can be playing together. And as a caller, sometimes, you know, what the tune is going to be. Depending on who the caller is and who the band is, you might talk about ahead of time and be like, oh, it's going to be this specific tune. Often you don't. As a caller, you're going to say, okay, here are the specific moves where they happen in the dance to the band, and they'll say, okay. And then it's a surprise as soon as the band comes in. You're like, oh, so this is what we're going to be dancing to. And the best bands do a fantastic job of finding the right tune for the dance. So we've been really lucky to have some really great bands here in Tucson, Steam and many of our other local bands that have that repertoire and that rapport with the dancers in Tucson. You get to know personalities, you get to know what the area likes and what people respond well to.
Yes.
But yeah, so being able to, as a caller, feel that music and pick up on what the tune is pretty quickly so that you can translate the way you're calling and kind of how loudly you need to speak and with what sort of cadence, whether it's going to be really peppy or whether it's going to be kind of slinky. That depends on the music and the dance. And that helps the dancers know what they're doing too. Go ahead, Dave.
Often when, before the caller teaches a new dance, he or she will say, I want something very slinky for this. This is the dance moves in here. We want something slinky, or
Smooth.
we want it smooth, or we want this one upbeat and like with real clear phrases. And so as a band, we take that as a starting point. And we go, okay, this would be, let's start with this tune here, and that will be nice and smooth and do that. But after a while we go, oh, let's go into something that is totally different. and it's fun to watch the dancers at that point because they're doing this smooth thing. And then all of a sudden you're in Jamaica somewhere and you have this syncopated rhythm, and and you look and the dance still works that way.
Just feels really different. We did a really interesting workshop that where we took a tune that we knew would not work with the dance, and this was in a small workshop, and the caller called in a way that they knew would not serve the dance. So we did everything kind of wrong, and then we changed just how we were playing that tune to maximize what we could do with it to meet the needs of the dance, and the caller did the same. And then we switched to a tune that actually fit the dance, like actually inherently suited the dance. And then we all talked about it, like how did that feel and what was wrong. And it was real interesting because the dancers were like, it was just harder. It was so much harder to dance to the wrong tune, even when you tried to play it right. So that was interesting. And that's our goal, is to make it easy and let the dancers explore dancing without having barriers. So
Christine, bringing it back to you as not a contra dancer, as I think you mentioned a bit earlier, as a dancer, what are the connections you see between this style we've just watched and your own? How do you imagine dancing to this within your own dancing framework?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so interesting because there are so many similarities. Like Abby, I really liked what you said earlier in terms of like the energy that goes back and forth, and that is very true. I think in Ceilidh dancing as well. What is very different is at least, especially in more competitive, but even like just in the impromptu Ceilidhs, there isn't that musicality to Irish dancing in that like there's not a lot of interpretation of the music. It's a little bit more structured, I think. We don't like it if they add extra beats. we don't take kindly to that. It stresses us out.
Do you want like that either? Just
okay. Right, you said that was more clogging, right? Where you
Yeah.
had extra stuff? Okay, apologies, I got my styles backwards. But there are a lot of similarities in terms of like Haley dancing is done in pairs, and you'll have like the couple switching, like the pairs switching with each other, and then also switching within partners. That was something I noticed as a really big similarity. And I think they can be quite long, not maybe the 10-minute length. Like the clip that we showed earlier, the way a lot of Kaylee dances are structured is it's a little bit like, and maybe contra dances are like this, we just haven't touched on it. The way kind of the steps are set up, they're usually pretty well established. Like some of them I was reading a couple of days ago are pushing 100 years old. Like, so they're kind of well established, well known. There's less, I think, of a function for a caller. Like if you're at like Irish weddings or something and you have people who are pretty well accustomed to doing some Kaylee dancing, like they're not taking classes, they're not doing it regularly, but even just a little bit, there will be dances everybody knows. And so you don't really need a caller for those. If you're like at a St. Patrick's Day party or something, and well, like my mom will often do it. Like it's I don't know that Claire, I can't remember the right terminology. I don't know if she would call herself a caller, but she'll say the steps.
They don't. They call themselves like, I think like a cure.
Yeah.
Say that. Or, I don't know.
Yeah. It's not, yeah, it's less of a defined role. It's to serve a function, but they're not going to influence like how the dancers interact with the music. They're literally there just to be like, you're going forward and now you're going backward. Or you're switching spots and you get there quick. But so there's less of a role for that. It's footwork wise, I feel like Kaylee dancing is a little bit more technical. It's a lot more precise, which comes back to what Claire and Dave mentioned earlier. Like when we are doing it, especially with live music, it's like you will see dancers like telling them to slow it down or speed it up. There's a lot more of that going on. But yeah, a lot of similarities. It was really great to see how similar they really were.
Now you're going to go contra dancing, aren't you? Huh?
Yeah, you never know. When we're ever allowed to dance in person again, I will dance anything these days.
Yes, I imagine we're coming towards the end of our time. So maybe in closing, the challenges and opportunities of dancing in a pandemic when social dancing is not really a thing that feels possible. What has been challenging and what feels like a way forward for these traditions?
I'll start with that, and I imagine Claire has some thoughts too. That is one of the great joys of contra dancing, at least, is that you are walking into a room with a whole bunch of other people that have come from all over town or all over the state. And you're breathing each other's air and you're touching each other's hands. And that is exactly what we can't be doing right now, which is terrible, because so much of what Contra does is create that community that we're missing right now. That being said, I know there's been a great push to doing remote Contra and remote dancing. So people will get on Zoom or we'll do kind of video chats where there will be a band that will play and there will be a caller, maybe in the same room, maybe in their own house. And each person is doing dancing in their own house, so people are watching. I've logged into a number of these and danced in my living room, and I've sometimes with success, sometimes tripping over things, which is an interesting challenge. But there's different ways that the callers will accommodate dancing by yourself. Some will have you imagining being in the hall and trying to keep that line of dancers in your head and oriented. And others will kind of adapt the dance and find something that works for specifically solo dancing. And there's benefits to both of those, but that's been a good stopgap. But I don't know, Claire, what do you have to say on that matter?
Well, I think it is really just a stopgap, and there's a lot
I
of
hope so.
there's a lot of people who find it very challenging. That said, I will say that our band has been booked. Well, we've played DC, we're playing Seattle, we're doing Missouri. We just got asked to play Atlanta. This is all in a month, and so in some ways, I feel like there's the way people get to know bands is by dancing to them, and so who, when you go to a dance, you're up there on the stage and they're getting to know you. They really get to know you better at a weekend where they're interacting with you. Well, these Zoom things actually allow them to get to know us a little bit better because they're seeing our faces and people are talking about you, and that's really been good. It's been allowed us to reach more people, and it's kind of creating this sort of like world of musicians working to play contra dances across the country, and we're all over the country. So that's just wonderful. And callers too. I mean, we played a dance in DC with a caller from California, and none of us flew anywhere. So
And that's something as a dancer too. You get to join into. I could go to a Washington DC dance, or I could go to a South Carolina dance
Right.
from my own living room without having to get a flight, without having to find a place to stay. So in some ways, it's making the contra world smaller, and making it possible to get to know dancers, bands, and callers that you would otherwise not see if you weren't traveling. So
when
in
you
some
do,
ways, there are some pros to it, but yeah, it's definitely still not as fun as dancing in the hall.
No, and for the band, when we had a caller in LA, we were together as a band, and that was fun to play, and we knew what the dance was. But our sound would go to the caller could hear us, and then it would go out through Zoom. But we couldn't hear the caller. So our Zoom screen had to be on the caller, and she would hold up signs that say, "one more," or "pick it up." And so we couldn't see the dancers. And so it was less satisfying for that. But we got to play, and that was fun, and we got to do some fun things. And then you'd all change the sound. So then in between, you could hear people talk and see some pictures, but it'll be much more fun to actually do it in person again.
We really miss it. But it's nice that people are putting in that effort. And I think maybe it speaks to what Abby said about community. It's like that's such a strong part of contra dance, and that's why they're not just going hiking instead or doing something instead. That connection that they have with this, breadth of people, different ages, different places. It's pushing them to want to connect. And so I think that's probably a big part of the driver for these events.
And one thing that I took part in a discussion, or I watched a panel discussion a few months ago, I think, about contra dancing in the time of COVID and how to get past that. And one thing that stuck out to me from that conversation was one of the panelists brought up that if you look back at the 1918 flu pandemic, what happened after that when people finally could get together again was a huge explosion of social dancing, not necessarily contra, but social dancing in general. And I imagine that I'm crossing my fingers that happens again, because once we're at a point where we can get together in groups again, that's something that I think we're all missing right now, is being together in groups and having that opportunity to run into strangers and talk to old friends. And so I am imagining that once we can get back together, it's going to be people flocking to come and participate in these social things that we've been missing for so long.
I think that's a very hopeful note to end our conversation with. Any final words from any of you?
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much
Thank,
for making this happen. And to all those people out there in the world, I hope you come to a contra dance someday and we get to play for you and call for you and dance with you.
I hope we get to see you at the next actual Tucson Folk Festival.
Oh, no, meet yourself.
Meet yourself. Sorry. Sorry.
You know, that one too. So,
All of them.
I have to say, the folk festival is actually where I first got introduced to contra dancing. So both that and Tucson Meet Yourself are great opportunities to explore and see new things that you haven't.
And eat new things.
I actually wonder, I think probably Dave was playing and I was calling for that little contra dance behind the Tucson Museum of Art.
Yeah.
Were you so.
I think, yes, it was. It was an important day for me. I didn't know.
Yeah. For us too.
I'm glad.
Now you're with us.
Yes.
I'm glad we could reunite some Tucson dance family today. Claire Zucker, Dave FIRESTINE, ABBIE SORG, and Christine SOLINSKY, thank you all so much. Thank you to you all at home for your support of the festival and for being here today. We'll see ya.